Hi, my dear Sir family. Today we are going to be looking at a very brief description of December because I couldn't miss the fact that four planets will be in square to Saturn and Neptune. So we've got quite a stellium happening right now in the sign of Sagittarius. And one of them is, of course, Mars, which is going to be forming the exact square on 8th of December, and that's going to be happening on 25 degree of Sagittarius to 25 degree of Pisces. It's going to be followed by Juno. Juno is going to be happening on 16th of December. So you see that Juno is on 25 degree and Saturn also is on 25 degree. Then it's going to be followed by Venus, which is going to be happening on the 21st of December. Venus is still on 25 degree. Saturn is also on 25 degree. Juno is super close by. You see that the Sun a few days before is also in square to Saturn as well. And then we've got Mercury. And Mercury will be squaring Saturn on the 30th of December on 26 degree. And of course, Saturn is on 26 degree as well. So as we can see, five planetary bodies are going to be squaring Saturn and Neptune at the same time before basically the the Capricorn season would start. So let me actually give you the exact date when the Sun is going to be squaring Saturn as well, so that you have got all the dates that you need. I forgot to check that one. Sun square Saturn, replace search, and then you see that that's happening also on the 26th of, sorry, on the 16th of December. So it's going to be happening exactly at the same time. So let's break that down very briefly, what it might mean for all of us on a personal level as well as on a global level. But I also would like to mention that I'm already in Christmas spirit. And I decided to do a charity webinar on the 27th of December. And this webinar is going to be about my intense research connected to oppositions. Most likely, you will get a lot of information that you have never heard before. I'm going to be talking to you about or sharing my findings connected to oppositions, which planet gets the most emphasis. And I'm going to be connecting this to Oriental and Occidental planets to start with, why the opposition would represent certain type of shadow work. Of course, I'm going to be giving you general guidelines about the kind of like the common conception about what opposition is, such as it's a seesaw effect and so forth. So we are going to be looking at, the traditional elements of it as well. But I wanted to share exactly how to kind of work with the oppositions and how you can use it for your own benefit. So this is going to be approximately about a 2-hour webinar. The proceeding is going to be going to a charity, a children's charity. I think it's a brilliant time because those kids might need Christmas presents and so forth. And also, what I wanted to mention is that this webinar is going to be, of course, recorded. If you cannot attend live, you're going to have a lifetime access to it, and it's going to come with slides as well. And most importantly, you can choose the donation fee. So the minimum donation fee is going to be $5. And then you can choose the rest of them as much as you would like to donate. So I would appreciate if you did that. I have been very keen on some children's charity work for at least about 8 years. I used to organize once a month charity events, not necessarily through astrology, but through corporate world. And then I pretty much enjoy just seeing, the kids being happy and so forth. I used to go down to the hospital and then give it to them and so on. So I decided to bring back this spirit because it's something that I have always liked doing. So if you can donate a little bit, that would be much appreciated. But let's get started with December. There is some really exciting stuff happening here. Obviously, we've got a core conjunction happening here, and that's Saturn and Neptune. And you can see that five planetary bodies are awakening the Saturn and Neptune conjunction. That's basically going to be the backdrop here. This is super rare. This is a slow moving alignment. Saturn, which is the planet of structure, reality, boundaries, represents discipline, responsibility, limitations, the concrete material world. While Neptune is our dreams, illusions, and disillusions, it represents spirituality, ideas, confusion, the disillusions of boundaries, and also collective consciousness as well. So the conjunction is taking place, of course. I mean, it's not an exact conjunction, but it is taking place right now in the sign of Pisces. So that is very much about the dissolutions of certain type of structures. Saturn has got this need for form, is challenged by the Neptune's capacity to dissolve. So this transit has historically been linked to the collapse of old systems, empires, foundational beliefs. But also, this would talk to you about the manifestation of dreams as well. That would be the highest expression of it. It's about making ideas real, grounding spiritual visions. The collective imagination should be formed into tangible reality. At its very lowest, it can bring a sense of disillusionment, a lack of focus, or the blurring of reality and fantasy, or even it could represent hidden truth and scandals as well. Now, we've got all these Sagittarian planets basically as a trigger point. So we've got a concentration of the faster moving planets in Sagittarius. They are acting as a trigger for the underlying tension of the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. So let's just think about what Sagittarius is. Sagittarius is the sign associated with truth, belief systems, long distance travels, higher education, law, optimism, and the searching to meaning to life, basically. So we have got the sun being part of it, right? And the sun is the core identity, your will, your life purpose. So the direct challenge with the sun to figure out your truth and belief system versus the collective ideal and the illusions. There is a need to clarify or define a realistic vision. Then we've got Mercury in the picture, which is confronting this confusion or deception with direct philosophical clarities. So maybe we have got a legal debates over what is real or what is not true. Then we've got Venus involved, and there is certain type of tensions in relationships or financial systems rooted in, conflicting ideas and boundaries. And then we've got Mars, which is a conflicting type of power, where action is taken based on that particular belief, directly challenging established boundaries or certain type of dogmatic behaviors. It's kind of like a call to fight for a higher truth. I would like to emphasize that Mars is actually out of bound. And then we've got Juno, which is the asteroid of commitment, marriage, and justice, basically. So therefore, it might bring up the topic of betrayal, commitment, and partnerships. They are all brought to the forefront, forcing a confrontation with existing structures. So if you have got any planets on 25 or 26 degree of the mutable signs, then basically you are going to be super impacted basically in December. And this could be slightly bit of a chaotic December. Now, all of them are forming a square aspect, which is a 90-degree angle. And this is a challenging aspect that builds tension and demands action. Sometimes it prevents energies from flowing easy. Now, if we compare the Sagittarius and Pisces axis or angle, It's a mutable square, meaning the challenge is about having to change perspectives, adapting to beliefs, new beliefs, or dissolving old uh, dogmatic behaviors. So this December configuration suggests, there is a high energy peak where themes of the Saturn-Neptune conjunction are activated by a driving need for truth, justice, and a new ethical framework. And this pressure can lead to certain type of a crisis of belief. Deep-seated beliefs are tested or shattered by harsh realities or dissolving boundaries. It could indicate certain type of activism or legal battles as well, like a legal movement, especially with Mars and Mercury in Sagittarius, which is quite a loud type of combination. It could target certain type of institutions or systems that are perceived as deceptive or somehow unjust. And maybe we have to be redefining commitments as well. Personal or collective commitments, that would be the Juno and the Venus element. And those commitments or connections might undergo a difficult kind of like phase, but it's all because we want something deeper. We want the spiritual truth rather than that flimsy illusion in our connections. So it looks like December is really going to be highlighting what the Saturn Neptune conjunction at the beginning of 2026 will be about. Now, we know that both Sagittarius and Pisces traditionally are ruled by Jupiter. And therefore, Jupiter plays a very significant role here. Jupiter is in the sign of Cancer, so that's the ultimate dispositor of this connection. In astrology, the dispositor is the planet that rules the sign a transit is occurring in, and it indicates where the energy ultimately settles or how the story is resolved. So, since Jupiter rules Sagittarius and Pisces, Jupiter itself effectively governs all these planetary energies. So basically, we've got seven of them involved. Involving the asteroid as well, of course. So we have to talk about what the Jupiter in Cancer is, which we can call as the guiding principle. By the way, if you would like to learn a little bit more about dispositors, then I'm going to be having a webinar just coming up this weekend on a Saturday, and I'm going to be teaching you how to read dispositors of your chart. But surely that's about emotional security. So, or nurturance. So there is this pursuit of growth and meaning is very much tied to how we feel, like we are feeling safe or we are cared for or we are rooted. It's about home, family, and the ancestry. So the expansion is actually focusing on a literal home or your own lineage or even to kind of build memories as well. It has got that sense of tribal or national identity energy to it. And also, the highest truth is sought through feeling and intuition, not just the abstract intellect. So, the entire crisis of Sagittarius and Pisces square, the conflict between the action oriented belief and that illusory collective structure is basically funneled through the lens of emotional security, collective memory, the past. So, what's very interesting is that obviously Jupiter is now in a natural trine to the Piscean cusp, but Jupiter is in a natural quincunx to the Sagittarius cusp. Well, it's not just natural, actually, it's going to be degree based. So there is the trine to the Pisces cusp of your chart towards Saturn and Neptune, right? A trine is a 120-degree aspect. A trine shows harmony and flow. It's an ease, it's an opportunity. Two water signs, they should get along pretty well. So somehow this suggests that collective dissolution and structural challenges are being nurtured or being spiritually supported by an intuitive understanding, for example. So the highest potential of that Saturn-Neptune conjunction, which is the manifestation of certain type of spiritual ideas, for example, is made possible through a return to a emotional grounding or ancestral wisdom. So, the idealism and the confusion of Pisces are given a foundation in caring and safety. But Jupiter is in quincunx to that Sagittarius stellium, basically. And the quincunx would talk to us about having to make adjustments. It's about realignment. Quincunxes bring us awkward feelings, demanding constant small adjustment, a fundamental shift. Why? Because the two signs share no elements. So one is water, the other one is fire, and they share no modality either. One is cardinal, the other one is mutable. Even looking at the gender element of things, that's also different as well. So we've got that Sagittarius who's looking for the truth, but it is being fundamentally challenged by our emotional, security focused resolution. So it's kind of like the impulse to preach and fight for my beliefs cannot be fully realized until we are realigned with our emotional needs. It's kind of like fighting for something that we don't know why we are fighting for it, but we just do it for the sake of it, basically. So we have to understand first that emotional security, we need the support of the family, we need the support, let's say, of the country, my tribe, and so forth. Actions are kind of like based solely on dogma or higher law, but it must be tempered, adjusted to ensure that it creates security and belonging as well. Otherwise, it can be expanding the conflict, basically. So it really feels like that the dispositor Jupiter in Cancer turns the challenging Sagittarius Pisces square into a lesson. And the lesson is having to ground empathy versus having that very abstract ideology. Sagittarius, like I said, it acts on that optimistic belief to challenge the reality or the illusion of that Saturn Neptune in the sign of Pisces. So the success is going to depend on the commitment to our emotional security and the genuine care, basically. Listen, action is required, right? We cannot just ignore, that Sagittarius part of our chart. But it mustn't be based only on truth, but on love, compassion, the desire to nurture your soul, for example. And I think that shrine provides a spiritual safety net, while the quincunx actually forces the Sagittarian energy to adapt its method from a purely intellectual or philosophical side of things. And then the emotional integrity, safety can be achieved. What's also very interesting is that in November, all these planets made a square to the nodes as well. Like the Saturn-Neptune conjunction is a crisis of the collective structure. But basically previously it looks like that I mean in November we had to make a choice. All those planets were squaring the nodes, and that's about having to make a choice. It's kind of like we call it as they were at the bend of the nodes. And it kind of indicates that we can go higher and then we can go very low as well. So it's a conscious choice that we had to make in November, whether we want to improve, we want to grow, or we are remaining somehow in our comfort zone, basically. So the North Node in the sign of Pisces, that's the direction of growth. That's the soul's purpose right now. So it calls for faith, compassion, healing, the acceptance of what cannot be controlled, going beyond control. However, South Node in Virgo, that's kind of like the default setting there. That's our comfort zone. It represents that we have been mastering like practicality, routine, criticism, perfectionism. And while it's super useful, clinging to this energy leads to worry and overanalysis and self-criticism. It's kind of like missing the forest for the trees, basically. So the collective task is to move from the critical control towards compassionate surrender. So, again, Sagittarius, the sign of beliefs. It's making a meaning. It's a truth. It's expansion. So the Sagittarian energy is preaching, declaring, fighting for a singular truth, basically. And it's being challenged and tested by the nodes as well, of course. So think of it as this, like, do we use our passion, which is very much Mars and Sun, to critique and perfect the world? And that would be the South Node in the sign of Virgo. Or do we use our passion to inspire faith and compassion? And that would be the path of the North Node. So since the Saturn-Neptune conjunction is also at the end of the Pisces tail, the square from Sagittarius activates not only, the this kind of like, let's call it as a T square, but it activates, of course, let's say our structural destiny. It's kind of like a structural collapse and rebuilding based on a potentially new idealism. But this is not random, This is all because it's connected to our soul's growth. And December it looks like it's a decision-making point. Every action, Mars, thought, Mercury, and value, Venus, as well as Juno, uh, taken in Sagittarius, this December is a karmic choice. It determines whether we expand or we are going to be pretty much collapsing. So, and it kind of like maybe with the squares to the nodes, we couldn't make up our mind, but it looks like there is no escaping from that. Now, I think it's actually very important to mention that the exact sequence is Mars first, then Juno and the Sun, then Venus, and lastly Mercury. So let's just talk about this sequence because Mars is the ignition here. And imagine that that's kind of like the action and the conflict. So Mars is a trigger anyway. So its square is the first and most volatile spark, turning this potential energy of this kind of ground cross energy into quite a kinetic energy, actually. So, it's a conflict, it's a protest, it's a forceful legal military action, for example, related to a very strongly held Sagittarius belief, which is religion, for example, or freedom. And it challenges that established structure and exposes the deception. So the very first planet is a confrontational planet. It is fighting for the truth. And it begins, basically. It feels like, obviously, Mars is out of bounds, so it feels like that this action must be taken. This Mars is risking being fueled by delusion or an over-optimistic attitude. It is demanding an immediate adjustment from Jupiter in Cancer. So it is pretty much telling Jupiter, listen, this is my castle. So I'm renting it from you. I need you to make an adjustment to that contractual agreement. And then we've got the Sun and Juno. They are both making an exact conjunction on the 16th, and both of them are running into Saturn pretty much immediately. So, of course, it feels like that the Sun Juno conjunction is actually super important, right? Because we have got the planet of identity, purpose, comes together with commitment and justice, and it's immediately subjected to the tests and limitations of reality. So Mars ignited the conflict. The Sun Juno square marks a moment where that the ethical side of things, the collective identity, are forced to confront the harsh reality of their particular crisis. So it somehow feels like that, um, you know, we have to be able to act in an ethical, like according to ethical standards. It's great to be passionate about certain type of beliefs, but the question is, are we focused on our integrity only, or are we focused on other people's, you know, needs as well? And, it's kind of like doing something unethical and it's being highlighted and seeing how rigid the structure is. It says there is no escaping the reality that the Sagittarian ideal is meeting is a very much of a, for example, a material boundary or a harsh reality. And Saturn demands accountability. The truth has to be championed, basically. Juno was a very revengeful when she got cheated on. So it is kind of like she's trying to find a partner who is going to be helping me take a revenge. Or any type of commitment issues or the flows of a certain type of relationship, connections, contractual agreements are highlighted right now by the sun. And imagine a leader or a political body being judged for their commitments and wrongdoings or good doings as well, of course. Um, yeah, so this is how. Oh, and then of course we are moving on because then we have got Venus taking over. And Venus governs values, relationship, and money. So after the fight has been ignited, the commitments got tested, Venus comes around. So what are we willing to pay for the truth, for this piece of information, for example? So this could be actually an economical upheaval related to the conflict or the shift in alliances, which are based on, shared values, or a confrontation with the material costs of maintaining that illusion. And that would be the Neptune and the Pisces. So we must choose our highest values. And then Mercury comes into the picture, which is, I gave you the dates already, on the 30th of December. And the Mercury is the planet of communication. So Mercury is the last planet, telling us that the previous efforts are now communicated, processed, integrated. So it's kind of like trying to make sense of this crisis situation. Um, the truth must be now communicated effectively so that there is no more confusion, basically. So this would be the very sequence of these energies. So we've got phase one, which is blowing things up, and that's on the 8th of December. Not necessarily on the very same day. Obviously, it could have started earlier as well. Okay, so imagine that Mars is going to be the spark because it hits Saturn first. It is questioning somehow the structural limitations and it demands action on a system. So a major confrontation, a military action is likely to begin around this time, unfortunately. And then we've got a confusion happening with that as well, because Mars then straight after runs into Neptune, which is, I think, around the 14th of December. That's a bit hazy there. We launched an action with the Mars Saturn, but I'm confused, misguided, or even it could indicate that I based my action on false information. And the energy level starts feeling drained a little bit. The motives behind the conflict become obscured. Um, And then we've got that moral reckoning part, which is Juno squaring Saturn, and then Neptune after. So we are trying to formalize certain type of connections. We are looking at the ethical side of that action. Was it the right one? Was it the wrong one? So, Mars ignited a conflict, but Juno is bringing a question alongside with the Sun. Who is in the right? What agreements have been broken? What agreements can we make now? What type of legal or political alliances can we come up with? Or what type of legal alliances are tested? And then we've got Venus coming into the picture, which is evaluation of things. So, it's valuing some of the connections basically, or some type of connections gets tested again. It's the sudden realization of the true cost of the earlier conflict. Maybe it's, financial collapse, a loss of a key alliance, or stuff like that. And then basically with Mercury, it looks like that we are coming up with a new narrative. So, guys, this is pretty much what is happening right now in December. I want to give you some kind of like scenarios, how I can imagine it more on a personal level rather than, kind of like looking at the global levels. So, you are passionate about something, you have got the future plans, but it looks like that your future plans are being questioned. Of course, Mars feels very compelled to act on a huge idea, Sagittarius, but there is certain type of resistance to it. So maybe, we need to choose just one major idea or truth to champion and then to let go of the rest so that we don't get scattered. Right, because Saturn in Neptune conjunction in Pisces, that's about healing, but surrender, but also your faith. Saturn Neptune says you need to have some type of spiritual boundaries, or certain boundaries are dissolved in your life, or long-held illusions and opinions are shattered because you were so firmly, believing in something. So it says, release the need for rigid control. Allow a chapter of your life to end so that you can welcome something new, right? Um, then you have got the climax coming up around December 16th, 17th. There is an integrity test happening in your relationship. Maybe you are having a serious conversation or an event is occurring in your marriage, business partnership, and then you're gonna have to redefine your core self, your commitments. Maybe it forcing you to leave a partnership behind that no longer aligns with your personal truth. Or maybe you are required to sign a difficult contract that really demands a great discipline and responsibility. Maybe you start questioning your career goals, but you hit a wall there. And you may realize that the great plan you have been working on is somehow like structurally flawed. And you all of a sudden your optimistic vision could drastically uh, drop. And the resolution is Jupiter in Cancer, which says, like I said, does this action or belief protect my inner circle, my home life? You know, am I making this decision from a place of fear or analysis, which might be even the Virgo North Node, or from a place of like intuitive, deep-seated care? Because the growth is gonna come into your life when you trust your gut feelings. Or does this structural change create a more secure and safe future for me and my loved ones? So, let's summarize very briefly. December is about making a tough, real world choice that ultimately serves your soul's need for safety and belonging. So let me know in the chat box below where Sagittarius or the Pisces cusp of your charts are. But if you would like to get a little bit more insight of how this might be playing out, then you might want to consider signing up on my membership program, because you will get weekly videos, and each weekly sign is approximately about 15 to 20 minutes long. So I can, of course, go into much more detail in those videos. So thank you very much. Oh, don't forget to subscribe and like the video, share the video, comment on the video, and please consider supporting my charity cause. That would be much appreciated. Thank you and have a great week. Bye bye.